Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pocket Coach. And today we are going to cover an experiment called team metrics and KPIs. With this particular experiment, this is one that's, let's start the timer. Can't forget that. There we go. This experiment is near and dear to my heart. I don't know that I can get it done in 5 minutes, but I can definitely get you a lot of great stuff in the first 5 minutes, and then we'll go deeper if we need to. So I love metrics. I read tons of articles about metrics. Metrics are massively misused. And so I do have an upcoming article where I'm going to talk about the misuse of metrics and what to do instead. So I'm looking forward to that. Whether I just make a video or an article, we'll see. Anyway, so let's talk about this metric. Every Agile team should probably have some sort of metrics, right? And we'll talk about different metric models in other videos. So I'm just going to cut to the chase for teams specifically. So first off, the problem. The team has no way to show if it's improving, getting worse, or is it stable over time. Every team should know their trajectory. And if you don't, metrics are a way to do that. Okay, so hypothesis. If our team can see when it's improving or slowing, they can use that information in their retrospectives to design value delivery acceleration experiments, VDA, improvement, relentless improvement, RI, whatever you want to call it. They can design experiments to get better. And they can do that in the very next sprint and measure if it actually works because they have, team metrics, team KPIs. Time frame for this typically is 6 weeks, as per to persevere every 2 weeks. Typical outcomes. We want to increase the quality of our improvement experiments, right? So now our improvement experiments can actually have teeth because we can see if they are actually helping us get better or not. Skill growth. So what do you got to do to get through this experiment? You've committed to using some KPIs, and examples include the ones here: sprint stability, burndown, say-do, velocity, etc. And you look at these KPIs during your sprint review with your stakeholders, and you look at them during your sprint retrospective, and you think about them during your sprint planning in order to improve your team. So that's what it takes. It's not just having the metrics, it's using them in your critical events, even the daily stand-up as well, by the way. Okay, so now let's get into it. So for the next 3 minutes, I'm going to show you my favorite metrics. I'm going to minimize this. So right here, I have a list of some of my favorite metrics. And my first metric is sprint say-do. It's a predictability metric. And again, when you look at the metric models that I've introduced to the world, you'll see predictability is one of the categories and how that all works in a different video on Equip. In the meantime, say-do ratio is, do the teams say what they're going to do? The second metric is velocity stability. However, if you can overlay cost per sprint, that's actually very useful, because velocity stability, if your cost per sprint goes up and your velocity goes up as well, that's not a win. And how does that happen? If you add team members or if you extend your sprint length, your sprint costs will go up. So that's why cost per sprint is nice. If you don't know your cost, then you could just do sprint length and number of people, and then you would get the same kind of understanding. But if you don't look at that with velocity, sometimes it's hard to tell. Either way, you'll see why it's so important. The third metric that I like my teams to master is Burndown per sprint. Now, everyone's heard of this, but I think I'm going to show you some unique perspectives on that. And finally, the fourth metrics is how many experiments are you running? Every team is supposed to be relentlessly improving. If you can track how many experiments you're running, then I can know if you're improving. The fifth metric is defect backlog size. So especially for coding teams, this is not as appropriate sometimes for business agility teams, although sometimes it is. How many defects do you have out there, and how big is that backlog? This lets me know whether or not you're investing enough of your efforts into quality. If that backlog is growing and growing, that's a problem. Okay, and then beyond these, there's a ton of other metrics, and I can show you our teams have done tons of metrics beyond these, but this is a great first 5. Any metrics should help you evaluate your experiments. So let your experiments design your metrics for you. And it's all about your team engagement, your team products, your team flow, that kind of stuff. The Equip and ID models, as you can see here in blue, those are 2 of the articles I've written on models for metrics. You can take a look at those or just wait for the videos to find the best metrics for your work. And finally, check the subfolder here. Again, when the app comes out, you'll be able to see these subfolders, and you can see all kinds of other metrics that we've done so far. So that's my overview for team metrics. For the next 5-minute chunk, I'm going to go inside of each of these metrics that you've seen here and show you what they look like. And for the final 5, probably 15 total, I'll go into the metrics beyond these. Okay, so let's go ahead and close, minimize. So the first one is say-do ratio. Okay, oops. All right. So here's an example of a real team say-do ratio. Now, first of all, this is taken from Jira. Most tools do something like this. Jira annoys me. They have got a great sprint report, but it annoys me that they do not give me my percentages of say-do. I actually have to calculate them manually, and that's just frustrating. Unless someone knows a way, then please leave that in the comments, but I have yet to find that. So you can see here, in the first sprint, this team had a 16% say-do ratio. In other words, they got 5 stories done out of 31. So their say-do ratio was very bad. Time is up. I'm going to reset the timer for another 5 minutes. All right, let's do it. Now, notice over here, it actually shows story points. You literally could turn that off. The points themselves are actually irrelevant. So for those people who are hashtag no points, like turn them off. I don't care. It's not important. The points help me do some other kinds of things though. So I like using points, and you'll see that in one of my other videos. In the meantime though, the team committed to 31 points and actually only got 5 done. So their say-do ratio is 16%. So very, very bad. Now there's a goal here. The goal for say-do ratio is 80%. Why 80%? Why not 90%? Why not 100%? In your personal life, it should be 100%. If you say you're going to a party or you're going to come over and help me move or whatever, you should always fulfill those commitments. But in software development, 80% is the right amount. Why? If you go for 95%, 100%, even 90%, the team is going to have to use a lower velocity in order to achieve that level of predictability. As an example, if I know I can fill 100 envelopes a day, and you tell me I'm going to get punished or not get my bonus if I don't make my commitments, I'll just commit to 80 envelopes a day. Because even if the worst happens, I'll still get 80 done, right? It'd be very rare for me not to get 80. And then sometimes I'll get to the 100. Like I know, sometimes I might even go higher. So you force the teams to have to go slower. Now, in certain life critical systems and whatnot, maybe that's a good thing. But for average development, allowing the team to have a bigger velocity target with an 80% say-do lets them reach for more work. You'll see another way that the 80% is helpful in just a minute here. So here you can see 16%. Then the team got to 87%. So they're in the sweet spot, 80 to 100%. By the way, it's 80 to 120. If you go above 120, that's a problem also. If you hit 150%, your planning is messed up. People are like, oh, you did 150%. Don't do that. That's rewarding metrics. Never reward metrics. There'll be a separate video on why not. Instead, 80 to 120. And if you're outside of that, why? And if you're inside of that, cool. Okay, so 87, 87, 98, 100, 30, 83, and 83. So if the rest of the time, this team was right in that sweet spot for say-do. Let's look at another example. I think I can just hit right arrow. Yep, here we go. Here's another example. This is a team, and notice that there's sprint 4, 5, 6, and then it's 0, 1, 2, 3. Sprint 6 is half the size of a normal sprint. And notice their velocity is half the size of their other velocity. So that's pretty wild that they're that predictable, that in a 1-week sprint, they do half the work as a 2-week sprint. Sprint 5 is always a low balled sprint for these kind of teams that plan. This is a quarterly planning team. So they always low ball their 5th sprint to give themselves wiggle room. And that's why you see that. So honestly, most of the time we just ignore sprints 5 and 6 for teams like this. And we just look at sprints 4, 0, 1, 2, and 3. And you can see, yes, sprint 0, that's the way this team numbered it, but sprint 0 was a normal 2-week sprint. So you can, if you know what sprint 0 used to mean or means in industry, that is not what it meant for this team. So they actually could look at 4, 0, 1, 2, and 3. And you can see that it's actually, their velocity is quite stable, but 113, 194, 100, 105, 103, 112, 93. Now, I told you 80% is a target. Get this. If you hit 90% 2 sprints in a row, the team should consider bumping its target velocity by 20% or 10%, right? So let's say 20%. And that way they have wiggle room, right? So if you keep hitting 105, 103, 112, you're shooting too low. So bump this up. And you can see that's exactly what the team did. They had 3 in a row where they were above 100. They bump up their target, and sure enough, they still got to 93% of that. So they could even bump it again. Now, I'm not looking for teams to work overtime or stress themselves out. It's just a cool pattern that if you keep hitting above 80%, above 90% rather, above 90%, 2 or 3 sprints in a row, it's time to consider increasing your velocity target. Here in this team, this is a brand new team. Here's sprint 6. They got 100% of their say-do. They weren't brand new, that's right. But the team had dramatically changed as people. So in sprint 6, they had 100%. In sprint 0, 103%. In sprint 1, they hit 105%. 118%, but notice that they then bump up, right? They had too many sprints in a row, so they bump up their target 97%, 93%. So they're like, we're bumping again. They bumped up and they still hit 104%. Now, if this team is working, now when I see this, you might be like, oh, wow, they're getting so fast. Don't celebrate. Ask, how are you achieving this? Are you guys working overtime, right? Are there any negatives about this velocity increase? No, is this legit? What are the experiments you're running that have gotten your velocity so high? Are you guys doing experiments? Or are you just maturing as a team? Metrics are not to be rewarded or punished. They are meant to open dialogue. because if they're doing something specific, maybe we can package that into a reusable experiment for other teams and bring that experiment to those other teams. So we don't want to reward the metric. We want to reward a team that says, no, there's a reason we're getting faster and we could teach others how to do it. Wow. Reward that. All right, that's our second 5 minutes. And so in that 5 minutes, I just covered one of the metrics, which was say do. So now let's go to the next metric, which is velocity stability. I'm going to reset my timer for a third 5 minutes, bringing us to 15. Okay, so velocity stability, I can use these exact same graphs for that. So you can see what we want is a stable velocity. So this first team here, you can see their velocity is a lot more unstable. This team here, if you throw out 5 and 6, because they're unusual sprints for them, their velocity is quite stable. And then if you look at this team, you can see their velocity is stable and rising. So when it comes to any metric, you should set goals. Now, some people think a goal means a specific number. It doesn't have to. Like, for example, on say do, 80% is a specific number. Or you can set a trend. So for velocity, what we want to see is flat or rising. And so this team is rising, so that's a good thing. This one here is fairly flat, a little bit rising near the end. And this one here is not flat at all and not really rising either. So this is the team of the 3 that has the most trouble with their velocity. And so now the question is, why is it? How can we help? Okay, so that's, and again, don't forget about cost per sprint. And if you don't have that graph, simply ask about it. Did you change your number of people? Did you change your sprint length? And if the answer is no to both, the metrics mean more. Okay, burn down. Let's go into burn down. So burn down, people talk about this all the time, but let me show you something here. Here's a team that had 5 sprints of burn down. I don't care about burn down for a single sprint. What I care about is burn down sprint by sprint. So once you have a couple sprints, that's why it's the third metric, because I want a couple sprints of history. I can start to see the maturity of the team. So if you look at this team, this was a brand new team. And notice this is task burn down. So this is the number of tasks I worked on, not stories. And it's very different. So in the number of tasks, you can see in this first sprint, their pink line should be near their yellow line. And it's actually pretty good. Their blue line should be very stable. And you can see there's a lot of volatility here, big drop, and overall not very smooth here. It's stabilized. So like, whoop, that's it, right? So this blue line, by the way, again, Jira does not paint this line unless you're in a burn up. I do not like burn up because it is burned down, flipped upside down. There's no reason we didn't need that, but people think it's somehow different. It's not. And the fact that Jira puts this line on the burn up but not the burn down really frustrates me, because there's no, as you can see here, these are all burn downs and it's got the total stability line here. This is in Excel. All these Excel templates are in the folders. It took us, by the way, 5 minutes a sprint to do our Excel metrics. Still, it's a lot better when you can use your tool than having to go to Excel, but 5 minutes a sprint is not a huge price tag either. Here you can see the team actually got a little worse. Their pink line is a lot farther away from their yellow line. So they had a lot less predictability day by day. And again, their backlog kind of grew. And then all of a sudden they pulled everything out and then they stabilized. So again, this is not great behavior. They're growing a lot. Now in sprint 3, look at the pink line. This is the best pink line they've had. So now they're really close to yellow. They're getting their groove on. And the blue line is actually really stabilizing as well. In other words, they're learning how to control the scope of their sprint. Down here, this is almost like a fairy tale. The blue line is almost perfectly flat. The pink line is hugging down that yellow line. Like, this is this team has hit their stride. And then in sprint 5, what the heck happened here? Suddenly there's a big pop in their total backlog, a big drop in their total backlog. And you're like, why was your backlog suddenly so unstable after what, sprints 3 and 4? And the pink line was way far away from the yellow line the whole time. And we had a flat zone right here when this went up before it finally started dropping down again. So this whole thing shows something happened in sprint 5. And you know what it was? Right here on day 5, they lost their product owner and were given a brand new product owner who wanted to change everything. So we can see the impact of the product owner change, of the instability of the team. We can see it in the metrics. That is great metrics. I can see this metric and know something messed up this team. What was it? Product owner changing around. Okay, what do we do to prevent that? Why do we have that happening so much, etc.? So you want metrics that you can actually look at and understand what happened in the world. Here's another task burn down on the top row. You can see this team had trouble getting their backlog started. Then they got more of their backlog started. They started with 20. Here they started with 0, then 20. Finally, in sprint 3, they actually learned how to populate their sprint correctly, and they burned down beautifully. On this team here, they were able to populate their backlog, another brand new team. These are both new teams. This team was able, because this team here had already worked from a backlog. They just didn't work in sprints and they didn't use Agile, but they always had a backlog. So for them, it was quite natural. And then you can see in the second sprint, they got a lot tighter to burning down against the line in the third sprint as well. And look at the stability here. So That's all task burn down, but in addition to task burn down, there's story burn down. So one of the teams in the previous example, team 2, they realized that while their task burn down was wonderful, their story burn down was not. So they chose to start mapping story burn down. Sorry, point burn down. You can see they closed nothing until the last day. So it's the hockey stick, it's the waterfalling the sprint, and they can now show that negative pattern. So once they started graphing it, they became motivated to try to find stories that they could close more frequently. And you can see already they got a lot better. And then in the third one, again, a lot better. So when you choose to measure something, have a goal in mind. We want to close stories more frequently so that we have more continuous delivery of value instead of it all being closed at the end. And one metric helped them to design experiments and test to see that it was working, and it did. Okay, so that is my third 5-minute time box. It looks like I'm going to keep going here. So I'm going to reset this to 5 minutes, and let's start that. Okay, back to my notepad. Number of experiments is how many experiments are you running, and then defect backlog size is how many defects you have, and then there's any better. So I'm just going to go the last 5 minutes here. I'm just going to show you some of the other things that we've done, but you've got the basics now. So what I've shown you, that's what teams should be starting with in general. If you haven't mastered the metrics I just showed you, those should be your next experiments for your team improvement. In the meantime, let me show you some of these other cool things that we've done. We have Scrum, Kanban, and SAFe. So I know that if you do SAFe, that's exciting. If not, that's okay. But so what I showed you are metrics that work for Scrum teams. Notice that we also have Kanban teams. Their basic 2 metrics are cumulative flow and cycle time. Scale teams, we have a few other things. And then we also have competency metrics, outcomes metrics, and hypothesis testing metrics. So if you're interested in this, you can kind of look at that more. You can pause the video. And then in additional metrics, we have all kinds of stuff that we've done over time. So team roll-up metrics, this thing was crazy. This is the one that took us 5 minutes to sprint. Oh no, this isn't it. This is one where we wanted to see multiple teams on one screen. So here you can see this blue team. This is the number of experiments. So this was the 4th metric on the list, metric 4, which is number of experiments. So you can see here, this team ran 1 experiment and they ran 2 more experiments. So this is a team that's learning how to experiment. This orange team didn't do any experiments until sprint 2, and the new team 3 hasn't done any experiments yet. So we can kind of see, we want to see that. And notice the goals. So every metric I create will always have a goal on it. So acceleration experiments, goal, increasing. We want to see this always going up. Team size, the goal is stable. We want to see it be flat. That's if we're not tracking cost. Remember, if we're tracking cost, we don't need team size. Sprint say do, this one has a numerical of 80%. So there is the goal, and there are the lines approaching the goal. Velocity, again, this is a trend one, flat or rising. So this blue team is good. It's flat or rising. The orange team is descending, and the gray team doesn't have enough data yet. And so we can talk to the team, hey, what happened? You had a real big drop in your velocity. For percent CNA, this was, now we do backlog size, but this is percent complete and accurate, a different metric. And again, stable or rising is the goal here. And then team net promoter score is stable or rising. Would you recommend others to be on the team? Team net promoter score is a way of measuring team satisfaction. And so you can see here, both teams were their net promoter score was going up. This is not one that you would do sprint by sprint, by the way. Notice that these all sprint 1, sprint 2. This one you would do quarter by quarter. So you see Q1, Q2, Q3. The blue team's net promoter score was -30. And now it's at 20. Anything above 0 is good. Anything above 50 is extraordinary. So the fact that they're at 20 is really good. The fact that they're at -30 showed that we had, work to do. So that was kind of fun on the roll-up one. Another metric that we can show you. I like this one, a tale of 2 teams. This was those 2 teams, like how they're, and I kind of showed you 2 of them as well, but they actually have a bunch of other metrics. Here's their story point burn down over time. What kind of who's coming to their demos, business interaction, health assessments, and they even have a quality dashboard. Neither one of them got the quality dashboard off the ground, however, so not a lot to show there. So that was fun, way to kind of compare teams in their journeys, not against each other, but in their ability to journey. What else we have? Metrics for safe teams. So again, if you are a safe team, we'll have a separate thing for that. Oh, we already did this one on the other slide, so I'm going to get rid of that. Work management tool metrics. What is this one? It's opening up. Slowly, very, very slowly. Sorry, folks, maybe I should have these things open before I start the video. I think it crashed. Sorry, folks. Again, yeah, see, look at this. That's weird. All right, well, there we go. So this is another example of showing flat. Here, this is an unusual, and actual equals planned is the goal here. But again, it makes the goal very clear. And the last thing I want to show you, scope negotiation tool. So this one was fun for people who do release burndown. Release burndown is the total story points in a release. So in this case, there was 1,419 points left to do in this release. And there were 3 weeks left in the release. And oh no, they were in week 3, within sprint 3, and they had 9 sprints planned. So they're a third of the way in. And so this here is how many weeks they would need in order to burn down through the whole backlog. This is how much more budget they would need to do the whole backlog. The velocity they would need to get to the whole backlog, the sprints gap that they have versus what they would need. So this kind of a sheet allows you to model different realities. So here, how do we get this team back to whole? Because they aren't. And so if you cap their backlog to 520, dropping 900 story points, they'll get done. If you add $1 million and 21 weeks, they'll get done. If you increase their velocity from 130 to 355, yeah, no problem, right? Yeah, just get to 355 and we'll get it all done. That's just a 273% increase. Or you can cancel the project and there's $600,000 that never got spent and you can spend it on something more valuable. So this kind of a tool with very simple data, you can actually look at how do we get this release back to on track. So we did a lot of fun stuff with that as well. And that is it. That is a 20-minute video. That's, I think, the longest one we've done for the Pocket Coach. Anyway, I hope you found this journey interesting. Lots more metric videos to come on different metric topics. As you can see, it's a passion area. So my name is Anthony Crane, and I'm recording for Pocket Coach today, and I hope that you found this video